Hello, everybody. We're back. Matt and Cheryl's Gen Excellent Playlist. I'm Matt.
I'm Cheryl.
And we continue to delve into the music and the pop culture of the year 1980 as we build our Generation X playlist, which started way back in 1972. We've already added several songs from 1980. We're going to go with a couple of the biggest hits of the year on this episode. We're going to talk some about 1980 movies as well, because there were a lot of very iconic films that came out that year, one of which featured a lot of great music, had a best-selling soundtrack. Although the movie flopped at the box office, one of the songs from that soundtrack will make our playlist today. That is Olivia Newton-John's Magic. And Cheryl, I haven't ruled out another song from that soundtrack possibly making my list. I'm choosing Olivia's song for our edition today.
Yeah, actually, I wouldn't rule out me maybe choosing that song too.
Oh.
So it might be a dual choice.
A lot of great music on that soundtrack album. Our other song, a big hit. Unfortunately, some irony in the title of this one. It was the last album released by John Lennon before his tragic death in December of 1980. And that's Just Like Starting Over, the first single from the Double Fantasy album, which came out almost a year ago to the day. Now, we're recording on Halloween. You're seeing this later. You're probably seeing this closer to Thanksgiving by the time this goes public. But it is October 31st today as we're recording this. So I chose to select a couple of horror movies from the year 1980 to view last night. And there are lots to choose from. There were a lot of...
So many. Oh my God. Actually, I was kind of shocked because I was going through a list of movies from 1980 and like half of them were horror movies.
Yeah. So a lot of big horror movies that year. A lot of them did big box office, including the first in what would become a very popular series of movies, the Friday the 13th series. The first Friday the 13th movie comes out in 1980. Also, the iconic Stanley Kubrick picture, The Shining. Now, I watched that first, then I watched Friday the 13th. You want to talk about two incredibly contrasting movies, just this sumptuous, incredibly well-shot, big-budget Kubrick picture, and then a super low-budget Friday the 13th. I've never seen any of those Friday the 13th movies before.
The only thing I remember from the Friday the 13th movie, and I know I've seen the first one. I may have seen a couple more. I know there's probably at least 13 of them. Is that it's so dark. Like, I don't really even remember seeing much of anything except just darkness and then Jason, it's like, that's it. Whereas the Kubrick film, it's so visual.
Well, my head's spinning this morning, of course, from watching The Shining. Now, I know I'd seen it before. And in fact, I've probably seen it more than once, but it'd been forever ago. I mean, I was very young the last time I would have seen it. But watching it last night, it's as if I were watching it anew. I mean, I remembered very little about it. Obviously, there's iconic scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
The most iconic, where Jack Nicholson is chopping through the door with an axe and sticks his face in there.
Here's
and says,
Johnny.
Here's Johnny. Now, I certainly remember seeing that scene in commercials and trailers as a youngster.
Yeah, or like on the movie poster.
Yeah, and that was improvised by Jack Nicholson, of course. But Jack Nicholson has always been, and maybe still is, my favorite actor. Although I can't say that I love him unconditionally in this movie, because he does ham it up in this movie. I mean, it's pretty over-the-top performance. And one of the many, many, many interesting things about this film, and I'm somewhat ambivalent. I love Kubrick. I mean, Dr. Strangelove and A Clockwork Orange, two of my all-time favorite movies.
Yeah, me too.
I've rewatched 2001: A Space Odyssey. I've probably seen that half a dozen times. I'll probably see it half a dozen more times, and we'll probably not be closer to understanding it, but that's fine. And that's the case with a lot of his movies. They're enigmatic. They're open to so many interpretations, and he's been endlessly analyzed and written about. But, his movies, good or bad, are always interesting. I mean, he's an incredible filmmaker. I mean, just the technically innovative things that he's responsible for. And then in this movie in particular, it wasn't the first use, but it was an incredibly effective use of the Steadicam, where they're traveling around the corridors of this massive, creepy hotel. In particular, the scenes where the kid's riding his big wheel.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only the visual, as the camera is following him around all these corners from behind, but the sound as the big wheel's going across the carpet and then goes off the carpet on the hardwood floor, back on the carpet.
Yeah.
Then on the that is one of the most memorable scenes in the movie.
He creates tension in such interesting ways like that. And all of his movies are like this. It just evokes a feeling, Like
Yeah.
so much of it is just feeling.
You get the creeps right away in this movie without it really even
Yeah.
seeming to try that hard. And one of the interesting things, a lot of his movies have, like I said, they've been endlessly analyzed. And this is a movie that wasn't really that critically popular when it came out. I mean, it's looked upon now as a great work, but at the time, critical opinion was pretty divided. And a lot of people said it's just not that scary. Where are the thrills? Where are the scare? Now, you watch it now, and I think what makes this movie very unsettling and scary is the reality of what it's presenting. It's more relevant now than ever. It's detailing the ineffective white man whose sanity is unraveling and the danger it's presenting to his family. I mean, that's obviously something that is of major concern contemporarily in this country in particular.
Yeah.
One of Stephen King's critics, and he hated this movie. I think he's somewhat softened his criticism of it now, but he certainly hated it at the time. One of the things he disliked, he did not want Jack Nicholson cast in that role, and I could kind of understand where he's coming from. And I guess I feel the same way. I think it might have been a more effective picture with a more subdued performance from the lead.
Yeah.
In the book, and I read Stephen King when I was young, in like high school, I kind of got into reading Stephen King. I don't think I ever got around to reading The Shining. I'm pretty sure I never read that, but I read a lot of his books and enjoy them. But in the book, the Jack Torrance character, Jack Nicholson's character, is pretty much normal and sane at the beginning. So it's about his deterioration from a relative point of sanity, once they get into this hotel. Whereas at the beginning of this picture, as soon as you lay eyes on Jack, you get the creeps. I mean,
he doesn't have far to go.
No. Well, in the job interview scenes at the very beginning, just the way he's speaking to these people, I'm sitting there thinking, if I were the one thinking about hiring this guy, I'd be like, boy, I don't know, this guy, something about this guy gives me the creeps.
It's really a good idea. Yeah,
exactly. Just something very unnatural about the way he speaks in that whole scene. And then, he quickly starts to go off the rails once they get into the hotel. Now, he is over the top in a lot of the movie, but it is effective in a couple of scenes. The scene where she's backing up the stairs with the baseball bat, that's great. That's an incredible scene.
And Shelley Duvall, I mean, she's great, actually, because she just seems freaked out all the time. Like, just her normal, she just seems freaked out.
Yeah. And, interesting. I don't know if there's a contemporary parallel to Shelley Duvall. I mean, not a very typical leading lady, although she got a lot of lead roles. She's not attractive in any sense of the word.
Didn't she play Olive Oil in Popeye?
Yes,
so that makes some sense, but yeah.
Excellent actress. But apparently she was very traumatized by the experience. It was an arduous process of making this movie over I think principal photography took about a year, and Kubrick drove her very hard, apparently.
Which he does.
Trying to get effective shots of somebody in fear for their life, just traumatized this poor woman who she was suffering health effects as a result. He got some of the desired results. I mean, when he's coming through that door, the iconic scene, she looks truly terrified out of her wits. So a lot of this movie is very unsettling because it's dealing with a very real concern, very real issue. But it's hard to get a grip on the movie because it's a maze you're caught in. You're trying to figure out what's real and what's not. Is this place really haunted, or is it all in this guy's mind? The kid has telepathic ability, and the title of the movie, The Shining, comes from the character, the chef, the Scatman Crothers character, who describes it as having a shine or shining when you have these telepathic properties. And you're wondering, does the kid has these gifts of premonition, or is he also mentally troubled? Because he gets analyzed by the female doctor early on. He's got his imaginary friend, Tony, the character that lives in his mouth and speaks through his finger. A lot of kids have imaginary friends, but this woman is keying in on him. It's like, does Tony tell you to do things? And that's disturbing to hear her ask that question. And I think this movie is a lot more troubling and a lot more disturbing and scary if you have been a parent and a spouse, because it's dealing with these real fears.
Yeah.
If you're raising a kid, is this normal fantasy behavior, or is this kid really psychologically troubled? And then the end of the film where you see Jack Nicholson in the old picture, now there's just so many unanswered questions.
Which Kubrick does. I mean, that's just part of his style. I haven't read the book either, but I think he took a lot of liberties, and probably why Stephen King didn't like the movie.
Yeah.
But when I watch it now, I feel like I watch it more as a cinematic experience rather than
Yes.
a
Yes.
plot-based movie. And that alone makes it a classic.
Yeah. It bears rewatching,
Mm-hmm.
which most of his films do, and a lot of
Oh,
great
yeah.
movies do. You're going to see and understand more the more times you view it.
Yeah.
But again, you contrast that with the low budget slasher pick, Friday the
Right.
13th, which for what it is, it's a decent movie. I mean, it's no great cinematic work. It was obviously very influential and very successful and spawned a lot of imitations. But for as low a budget as it was, bringing in pretty much an unknown cast, and I think the cast is effective for the most part. And part of that unknown cast is Kevin Bacon, who
Oh, okay.
yeah, a pre-famed Kevin Bacon. He's one of the first counselors to get offed in the movie, and that's actually one of the best scenes. Now, there's violence and there's gore, but when Bacon gets it, it's from under the bed, where the
Oh,
spear comes up from under the bed and pops out of his. That's a pretty cool scene. And then, of course, the one at the very end where Jason comes out of the water and grabs the girl and she's in the. That's a good shock scene.
I mean, that's basically what nightmares were made of when we were kids. So it all makes sense.
But it's funny you mentioned that. As kids, Friday the 13th probably would have been a hell of a lot more scarier.
Mm-hmm.
As adults and parents of children, The Shining is very troubling, very unsettling,
much more disturbing. Yeah.
to watch. But also the use of music by Kubrick, too. I mean, brilliant. A lot of similar music that he used in 2001, like modern classical and kind of avant-garde classical choral music.
Yeah.
But very creepy music.
Yes.
Like Ligeti and Penderecki and stuff like that. You know what's interesting, too? The movie is supposedly set in Colorado, in the Rockies. I don't think a single frame of that movie was shot in Colorado.
It was filmed at the Stanley Hotel.
Nope, it was not.
Oh, no, the Stanley Hotel is what the book is written about.
The book, yes. And Stephen King wanted the movie to be filmed at Stanley,
That's right.
But Kubrick decided it wasn't going to meet his needs. And if you know anything about Kubrick, a lot of his movies are shot on sound stages. I mean, it's just phenomenal, the art of movie making that goes into his films. All those interiors of this majestic historic hotel, the huge ballroom, the wide corridor, those are all sets created on a soundstage. It's just incredible.
That's pretty amazing.
And then the exterior shots, it's actually the Timberline Lodge here in Oregon, up on Mount Hood.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not the Colorado Hotel. And the sets they created were, I guess, they did a lot of research and visited a lot of these old lodges and based the sets on, because it's kind of a composite of a bunch of them. Part of the reason I wanted to watch some of these 1980 horror movies, not because it's Halloween and we're doing a 1980 episode, but if you're a fan of the Stranger Things series, which I am.
Yeah, me too.
There are so many references to movies of this era.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them I haven't seen. I mean, there are a lot of iconic 80s movies that I have just never bothered to watch.
I've seen most of them, like the John Hughes movies. And
right. Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of why I want to go back and watch a lot of these movies too. By the way, the number one movie of 1980 was Empire Strikes Back. One thing I noted when looking at the list of the box office for 1980, number one is Star Wars. Number two, Superman 2. So you've got a big budget sci-fi epic number one and a superhero movie number two. We haven't really changed much.
No.
In 43 years, right?
Right. Yeah, that's true. Another superhero movie came out in 1980, Flash Gordon.
Right. Yeah. Another one featuring a popular soundtrack, Queen. So for me, the two most iconic movies for 1980 would be Airplane and the Blues Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Airplane, still to this day, one of the greatest comedies ever
still
made.
Hilarious.
As far as laughs per minute. I mean, it's hard to beat. But the Blues Brothers is one, as a kid, I so wanted to go to this movie. I so wanted to see it. I was probably just becoming aware of the Saturday Night Live phenomenon. I was still too young to be watching it in real time every week. That would be a couple years down the road. Blues Brothers, it just ticked all the boxes for a young man. I mean, it's a buddy movie. They're on a journey. There's a lot of great music, and there's a lot of love for the original blues and R&B artists that Belushi and Aykroyd were into.
Like Aretha Franklin is in it, right?
Aretha Franklin, Ray Charles, James Brown. I mean, there's all these icons, all this great blues music in the movie. Now, what they did with their Blues Brothers characters and recording an album and all that, at least it shined light on the great original music that they were covering, if nothing else. And they had a great band behind them on that record. But, John Belushi is certainly no great singer, not even a good one.
I've actually never seen that movie.
What? Really?
I know.
Wow.
I don't know why. It just never crossed my path.
Oh, it's
I mean, I knew of it, of course, but I just never watched it.
It's a fun one.
Okay, I don't know if we're going to start talking about Xanadu now, but at the same time as Xanadu was filmed and came out in 1979, 1980, there were two other skating movies at the same time. One was called Roller Boogie, which starred Linda Blair from Exorcist fame, because they were trying to move her away from that character into something a little more wholesome. And the other one's called Skate Town USA, and it starred Scott Baio, Maureen McCormick, who is Marsha from the Brady Bunch, and Patrick Swayze.
Oh,
Patrick Swayze actually bought the rights to the movie and buried it so it would never be released on home video because it's so bad. And apparently Maureen McCormick says that there was like so much coke on the set, and she became a cocaine addict at that time too.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And it was just awful. Yeah. It's kind of interesting when you go back and look at these movies that these people who, like you said, Kevin Bacon's in Friday the 13th, a small role, but this is where their careers were starting. And a lot of these movies are pretty bad movies.
So we wanted to talk about movies and music in this episode. And the movie we're going to start with, the song is Xanadu, which came out in 1980. It got a lot of hype, a lot of promotion, but never made it at the box office. I don't know where it finished in the box office rankings that year, but it was
probably at the bottom.
Considered. So I just scrolled down the list. Xanadu was number 29 at the box office in 1980.
I guess it could have been worse.
Yeah, it could have been worse, but it was a big, there was quite a budget and a lot of promotional budget on this movie. Olivia Newton-John is the female lead. The male lead, we've already referenced the Warriors. It's Michael Beck, who is the young man, I forget the character's name, but the male lead in the Warriors. And really, as far as his career is concerned, that's it right there.
Pretty much it. Yeah.
Really nothing else of note. I don't know how big a name he was. I mean, the Warriors got a lot of press, a lot of negative press when it came out.
I don't think he was a very big name because it started out as a low budget roller skating movie like the other two I mentioned, Roller Boogie and Skate Town USA. Yeah. And it wasn't until Olivia Newton-John signed on that it became, because at the time she had just come off Grease.
She was big time. Grease was the number one movie of the year, right? 1978, 78, I guess. 78, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Late 70s.
Yeah.
So at the time that they're beginning this project, disco and roller skating are very hot, and they wanted to take advantage of that and kind of combine them with the classic musical. And they wanted to weave like classic movie musical music in there along with contemporary musical sounds as well. So kind of an ambitious idea. But you said it was going to be a fairly low budget deal. But then Olivia Newton-John read the script and really wanted to be a part of it. And at that point, you've got the superstar on board. Now it's no longer a low-budget picture.
But I can't imagine how she decided she wanted to do it based on the script, because really, there's like no script. There's very little plot or dialogue.
That is one of the odd things about the movie. It's just kind of a dream state.
Yeah.
From start to finish. It doesn't really move.
It's like a long music video, really.
Yeah.
Like a fantasy music video.
Well, and in that way, I guess it's somewhat ahead of its time, because this is pre-MTV and before music videos were really pervasive in popular culture. But now, in retrospect, it's just like a series of set pieces set to music.
Yeah.
Which essentially a lot of musicals are, but the best musicals have a strong narrative thread running through them too, which this movie certainly does not.
Yeah.
But it does have a lot of interesting visuals and a lot of great music.
It does. And I think it kind of got away from them while they were filming it. The script wasn't strong to begin with. And then it sort of became, where is this going? Or what are we doing with this? But we have all these visual aspects, and we have a star in Olivia Newton-John who also is contributing to the soundtrack. We have ELO on board, Joel Silver's producing, Kenny Ortega doing all the choreography. This is early in his career. And Gene Kelly. Getting Gene Kelly to agree to do this movie is a big deal.
Yeah, he was essentially retired at this point. If you're unfamiliar with Gene Kelly, iconic golden era Hollywood actor and one of the great dancers in Hollywood
Singing
history.
in the Rain.
Singing in the Rain, for many people, the greatest Hollywood musical.
So I think that just the fact that all of a sudden they had all these people involved, it was like, okay, well, we better do something with this. We better make something out of this. And it certainly wasn't going to be based on the script.
Now, you watched it. Was it the first time you'd seen it last night?
Yeah, it's the first time I've seen the movie all the way through. I've seen bits and pieces of it. I love the soundtrack, and I have for a long time. But I watched the movie last night, and I was like, oh my God, I think I'm a fan. I really like this movie.
It always has had a cult following, and that it's kind of steadily grown over the years.
Mm-hmm. But honestly, I think that the reason why that happened is because it is so focused on the music and the dancing and the visuals in that sense, where a lot of movies from this time that were sort of a time capsule piece from the era, we're trying to incorporate a story and a script. And usually they were very weak, just like in this movie, but they didn't have the music and the visual to kind of pick up the slack and make it into something that people actually wanted to watch. Now, at the time, it was a complete flop. But yeah, I mean, I think it's grown in cult status. And whereas a lot of these other movies have just like gone to the wayside, or people you just can't even stand to slog through them. This one has fantasy element, which is very light, and it feels positive, and and the music is uplifting.
It's great escapist fare.
Mm-hmm. There's nothing creepy about it. It doesn't have anything that you are just like cringing to watch now. And I think that the addition of Gene Kelly, so when they first approached Gene Kelly, he said he was not going to dance in this movie.
Right. That's hilarious to me.
Yeah. Okay, I'll do it, but I'm not going to dance. And it's like, really? Okay, then why are we asking you to be in this film? But Kenny Ortega went to him and basically just described what he wanted him to do in the movie, which was based on what Gene Kelly had been doing and did best in his previous films at the height of his career. And so he kind of won him over, I think. And then he ended up, that's really the whole point of having Gene Kelly in the movie, is to dance. And he does. He roller skates too.
And, according to his daughter, he was a very accomplished skater, both on wheels, on wheels and blades.
His wife.
Oh, that's
his wife.
Wow.
Yes.
Way to go, Gene.
I know. She was 30 when she married him. He was 77.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, she said he was an accomplished roller skater and ice skater. He's very natural. I mean, it looks like he knows what he's doing. Yeah. And yeah, so that was kind of an added bonus too. Well, great, he can skate. Because really, like pretty much the entire movie, Olivia Newton-John is on skates. And she doesn't really look quite as natural and steady. Well, first of all, a lot of the skating sequences, you can tell it's not her because you can't see her face. All you can see is her hair. It's like, okay, well, that obviously is not her because it's a little bit more complicated. But the rest of the time when she's just kind of skating around, or there's a big dance scene with her and Gene Kelly, and she seems a little wooden and it's not natural. Like you can tell that dancing and just the movement does not seem natural to her. Yeah. And I think that it's offset by how angelic and gorgeous her voice is. So it doesn't really matter as much in this movie because you're more focused on her singing.
Yeah. He is no question, a top tier vocalist.
Oh yeah. I mean, she obviously has a natural talent. She's one of those singers that it just feels like it's just effortless for her. Yeah. It is kind of weird though, because she really has like very little dialogue in this movie at all. Most of the movie is just her skating around.
Great quote from Olivia after the movie. I certainly won't die from overexposure from that role, which is that's a very clever quote.
Which is probably for the best because it really could have hurt her career more than anything else if she did have more dialogue in that film, because I'm sure the dialogue would not have been good,
Well, it's clever because it's multi-leveled. I mean, she's underexposed in the movie and underexposed because nobody went to see the movie too.
That too, yeah. But the music was huge. The music became huge.
5 top 20 hits off that soundtrack.
And that's really what she would want to be known for that movie anyway.
And she said, I would have been much more upset if the music flopped. The movie flopped.
Yes.
Big deal. I learned some lessons. I'm still new to all this stuff.
And people don't expect her to be an amazing dancer and roller skater or actress. They expect her to put out great music.
Olivia had the big hit with Grease. She had some other missteps and not long.
I don't know if she was ever in a movie again after that really was did anything or was worth watching.
Yeah, nothing that was really that had a lot of artistic merit, I think. I mean, I think there were a couple of
No.
movies that did decent box office, but probably she did a movie with John Travolta.
Yeah, Twist of Fate. That
Right.
was
That was not
dumb.
good. Yeah.
No.
And that did not do well at the
Mm-mm.
box office. You know, she still had big hits to come. Now, Magic was the number one hit middle of 1980, and her biggest hit was yet to come the following year with Physical, which
Mm-hmm.
was one of the biggest pop hits ever at the
Mm-hmm.
time. So Magic is my song. I love that song, and I had the 45. I played it a lot. It's somewhat unusual. It's got that discordant kind of two-note riff
Yeah.
that leads into the verse, which is it's different. You know, it's not what you would expect, certainly in an Olivia Newton-John song. And she's continuing this move away from country pop into more straight pop. And at this point, she's there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always seen a lot of parallels between Olivia and Taylor Swift. And I'm kind of wondering, when is Taylor Swift's Xanadu coming out? Or at least something that, has that ambition but is successful. I can't imagine her being in a big musical that flops at the box office. I mean, the woman could do no wrong right now.
Yeah.
I see a lot of parallels between her and Olivia. Now, they both coming out of the country. They broke in as country artists. Olivia Newton-John, her first top 40 hit was in 71, just lower reaches of the chart. And then starting in the tail end of 73, she was making regular appearances high in the charts with country-influenced music, crossover stuff. I don't know that she was ever really embraced by the country community. She's not American. She's not Australian either. She's actually British. She was born in England and relocated to Australia. But, like Taylor Swift, emerged as a country artist, crossed over to pop, and then started getting into other media.
Wasn't Taylor Swift a songwriter, though?
Yes, she was.
Well, that's the thing.
That
She's a songwriter, and Olivia Newton-John is not.
Yes, that's where they diverge dramatically, is because Olivia Newton-John did some songwriting, but most of her hits were written by her producer, John Farrar. He's kind
including Magic.
Yeah, well, he's kind of the man behind the curtain in a lot of her success as the songwriter, producer, instrumentalist on a lot of her big hits, including the Xanadu stuff.
Magic? It's actually a pretty interesting song.
It is, yes.
I found a clip. It's not a live clip. It looks like a video. It's a promo video that they filmed for the song. And the guys playing guitar look like they're actually playing. Like they seem like they're playing what you hear. And there's some kind of cool little guitar things in there. Very subtle. But if you listen a little bit closer, and with her flawless vocals, I like it. It's a good song. And it fits in the movie. It has the whole fantasy theme. It's magic. And it also fits the tone of the movie. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's actually one of those songs, like a lot of the songs that we've put on this playlist, that going back and listening a little bit closer, I'm like, this is actually a pretty cool song. It's different. It's kind of, there's some unexpected things in there when you listen a little closer.
Well, it's kind of taking a page out of the XTC book, where you slide from the discordance in the verse into very catchy melodic pop.
Mm-hmm.
And there really isn't a lot of precedence for that in her. I mean, again, it's not like I've examined every song on every album of hers, but certainly among her hits, there was nothing quite that challenging as far as chording goes.
Yeah. And other songs on this soundtrack, like she does a duet with Cliff Richard.
Beautiful ballad. Yeah.
Suddenly. Yeah. Great ballad.
That's another one right up there for me for 1980. Great single.
And then the song Xanadu with ELO.
Xanadu.
Which plays throughout the movie several times.
Is that the only song where they actually collaborate on the soundtrack?
Yeah.
So if you don't know, the soundtrack is split in two. So you got the Olivia side and the ELO side, but they collaborate on one song, which is the title track.
Yeah. And ELO, Joel Silver actually asked Jeff Lynne if he would do the music. And basically he was like, well, since Olivia Newton-John is involved, I'd like to meet her. So, okay, I'll do it. And he says that he's never seen the movie and he never will. Although he does say that he thinks that it was detrimental to their career. And there's some parallels that I was drawing when I was watching this between the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band movie that the Bee Gees, Peter Frampton did, in the mid 70s, that basically tanked Peter Frampton's career, brought the Bee Gees down. RSO, Robert Stigwood's productions, totally went into the gutter after that. And they were probably about as equally successful, these two movies, when they came out. But the Sgt. Pepper's movie, it has kind of like this sinister, sort of weird, creepy air about it, where Xanadu has nothing of that. Xanadu is just so positive and it just feels so uplifting. And so I think that the only thing that I've ever seen as far as the actors, maybe Michael Beck's career, I don't know what happened to him after that, but was Jeff Lynne saying that he thought that it might have actually hurt their career because they really didn't do much again after that.
No.
But it was such a huge hit. The soundtrack was so big. Number one single with Magic, all over the world. I'm Alive charted. The song Xanadu was a huge hit. It had 5 hit singles.
Yeah, I guess one of the theories of why the movie didn't do well is, I mean, at the time they started production, disco was still big in culture. By the time the movie came out, it's well into 1980, and now you've had the disco backlash, and I think it suffered as a result of that. And the music doesn't scream disco. It's just great pop music, you know? I mean, there's a element of disco there, but I don't think of Xanadu as a disco
to
album.
Me.
It's just a great pop album.
Yeah, in fact, I think that Discovery is more disco for ELO than the pop music on Xanadu. And, you know, there's other movies like Can't Stop the Music, the one with the Village People, these other, where they were so embedded in the disco roller skate. And the other part, too, of Xanadu is you had the Gene Kelly piece and the 40s music. And there's a really cool scene.
Yeah, that's really neat.
It's really cool. And my favorite scene in the movie actually is with the Tubes. The way that they became involved in this movie is that they had worked with Kenny Ortega. He was their choreographer for their stage show for like 5 or 6 years before Xanadu. And so he had early on been brought into the movie, Kenny Ortega. And there was one scene where they wanted to have like a modern rock band. And he's like, I know a great modern rock band, the Tubes. The Tubes were not well known. No. They were very underground.
Very much a cult band.
Yeah. And so he brought them in.
At this point, they were best known for White Punks on Dope, right?
That was the only thing that anybody would probably know them from, and that still was pretty underground.
Yeah. It actually was a charting hit, lower reaches, but they were a cult band.
Yeah, and their fans were not happy with this either. Let me say, when it came out, they probably got the most backlash because they had a very loyal, a cult band, but a loyal fan base.
I think they've been pretty dismissive of the movie and their role in it since.
Yes.
I don't think they ever play that song.
They don't. And I think they're embracing it now more than they used to, but they still have never played that song live on stage, even though they do have requests for it all the time. That scene in the movie is actually really cool because they literally meld the 40s band, which is happening on one side, and that's Gene Kelly's vision of what he wants this club to be. And then you've got the rock band, which is Michael Beck's vision of what he wants this club to be. And they do this cool thing where the 2 stages are playing 2 separate songs. And as the song goes along, they meld not only the song together, but the stage itself together. So all of a sudden, these moving stages become one stage. And now both bands are on the same stage. And the song has now become a song that they're all playing together. And it's actually really cool.
I love that element of it. And, we talked about this before on our early episodes when the disco era is beginning. And one of the things I loved about it was it's almost like the big band era coming back with so many people being involved in the production. I mean, these huge orchestras and, multiple percussionists and string players. And that element of disco is interesting to me. But now that we're getting toward the tail end of disco here in 79 and certainly in 1980, disco is morphing into something completely the opposite, which is
synthesized
music that's made almost completely by machines with very little human input.
Well, this is exactly your theory of that big band melding into what, disco. And I mean, the Tube song, I wouldn't call disco either, but it's more kind of like a new wave-ish sort of, but it does have some elements there. I mean, it is coming from that era. And that's also why, like you said, I think that disco fell so fast that unless these movies would have come out, even like a few months earlier or 6 months earlier, they might have been huge. But because they came out after disco had been demoed, basically, it was too late. Then they were just so passé. And so now I think that's also why people can look at it with fresh eyes and have a different take on it, because there isn't that social backlash about it and that feeling that this is just so uncool.
Well, I love it when our songs tie together. There are commonalities here, not just the fact that they were both big hit songs, both number 1 on the U.S. charts. Just Like Starting Over was a global smash, one of our 2 global hit picks for 1980, Lip Sync's Funky Town being the other. But John Lennon emerging after 5 years out of the public eye, his first recordings since the rock and roll album they did with Phil Spector back in 1975. So he's coming out of hibernation. He's starting to do some press, and apparently he'd been quoted at the time. And people ask him, what do you think of current music? What's some of the stuff you like right now? He's a big fan of ELO. He commented about how he felt like they were natural successors to the Beatles, and he particularly singled out the Xanadu soundtrack and Olivia Newton-John's contribution, Magic, as a song that he liked quite a bit. Also said he liked Donna Summer's music.
He also said that he liked Paul McCartney Coming Up, too.
Right. Yeah. In fact, I think Paul likes to think that he kind of motivated Lennon to get back to work.
And John will be the first person to shoot that down hard.
Right. I think the exact quote was, "It's a nice piece of work," I think.
Which one, about Coming Up?
About Coming Up.
I think that he actually did like Coming Up, and he liked the album version, which was the more kind of funky, quirky version, not the live.
Not the one that we put on our playlist.
Not the one that we put on our playlist. But I do think that that is definitely an over-exaggeration on Paul's behalf to think that that was what sparked John to start creating music again. So that's the part that I just am like, no.
Well, whatever it was that sparked John to get back to work, thankfully he did, and left us this final album. Actually, it turned out to be 2 records because they recorded a lot of material that would be released posthumously on the Milk and Honey LP that came out about 3 years.
I think it came out in like 84 or 80.
Yeah. Maybe it was 4 years. 4 years later. Just Like Starting Over was the lead single from this album, released almost exactly 43 years ago to the day, late October of 1980. It's hard to say. I mean, I'm pretty sure I remember hearing about it and hearing it on the radio before he was shot. It was already becoming a big hit before he was murdered.
It was climbing up the charts.
After his murder, it shot to number 1 on both sides of the Atlantic and stayed at number 1 for 5 weeks in the United States. And it would be the first of 3 hit singles off that album, all of them really good songs. But it was not just a John Lennon album. It's credited to John and Yoko Ono Lennon. And the concept behind the album is supposed to be kind of like a dialogue between husband and wife, and their songs alternate from start to finish. Now, as a Beatles maniac, obsessive fan, and a fan of lots of the solo work, obviously you've got some strong opinions about this record, Cheryl. I know Starting Over is not your favorite song on it.
It wasn't John's favorite song either on the album, but he felt like it made the most sense to release it first as the single because of the lyric and, the sentiment behind it, which does make sense. And it's not, I like the song. It's just not my favorite song. There's at least one other song that I like better than it, but I do think it's a really good song.
Love the way it starts.
Me too. And actually, it's interesting because there's a version of Double Fantasy that came out a few years back called Double Fantasy Stripped Down. And it's alternate takes and, not as produced versions of the songs. The beginning of Starting Over, he actually says, this one is for Gene, Eddie, Elvis, and Buddy. He's talking about Gene Vincent, Eddie Cochran, Elvis Presley, and Buddy Holly. And they took that out and actually replaced it with the tolling church bells for the album, referencing the song Mother that was on his first solo album, Plastic Ono Band. He apparently was trying to make the connection that he's grown so much. And the lyrics start that way. We have grown, the first line.
Now, is Mother the first track on?
It's the first track on Plastic Ono Band.
And Starting Over is the first track on Double Fantasy?
Yep.
So how many people do you think picked up on that?
I didn't. I just read it and I was like,
you were 9 years old.
Sense.
You were 10 years old.
I mean, even now, I didn't pick up on it until just 10 minutes ago.
Oh, okay. All right.
So, no, I doubt very many people picked up on that.
We've talked about this before. I am woefully underinformed and undereducated on the Beatles solo material. The only John Lennon album I've given more than a cursory listen to is Walls and Bridges. That's like the only one I've really listened to multiple times.
Which was actually his last album before Double Fantasy. That came out in 74. He did record the rock and roll album with Phil Spector, which was all covers of 50s rock and roll songs. but it didn't come out until 75.
There's a whole saga, a whole show behind that record.
Yeah, so he took the tapes, he couldn't get them back. So it actually didn't get released till 75, but it was recorded in 74 before Walls and Bridges.
And there's a very candid recent interview on a podcast with Jack Douglas, the producer, who worked with John Lennon frequently during his solo career.
He produced this album, yes.
Talking about how Phil Spector was just completely losing his mind at this point.
That actually is sort of what prompted John to stop partying and just sort of pull back, because he had also been coming off his Lost Weekend, which actually lasted 18 months, where he and Yoko separated. He moved to LA with his mistress, who was like his personal assistant.
May Pang.
Yes. Those are the years where you hear about him out carousing with Harry Nilsson and Ringo Starr and Alice Cooper and making a fool of himself. And
don't forget Anne Murray.
And Anne Murray shows up in photos, which is just so amazing. And I love that there's photo documentation of that. During that Lost Weekend era, he was doing other things too. Like he was producing Harry Nilsson's album, Pussycats.
How do you rate Walls and Bridges?
It doesn't register for me much. I haven't listened to it that much. It's forgettable to me, which is actually the way I feel about Mind Games too.
Better than Mind Games though, right?
I do think it's better than Mind Games, yes.
Better than Sometime in New York City.
I have no interest in that. And actually, that's kind of goes hand in hand with what Yoko was doing in that time, too. Yoko was recording albums. In fact, she has an album also called Plastic Ono Band that was recorded at the same time as John's first solo album of her own. It's a full-fledged Yoko Ono album.
And how many people went out and accidentally bought that thinking it was the
Because
John
they have
Lennon
the same
album.
cover.
That's right.
They have the same cover, except John is leaning up against Yoko on the tree and she's leaning up against him on her album cover. They look exactly the same.
Can you imagine these people bringing that record home and putting it on, expecting the first John Lennon solo album?
Right. But it's interesting to me the way that their recording careers worked together. And actually, Paul was doing the same thing with Linda. He was calling Ram Paul and Linda McCartney.
Yes.
It had her name right on the title.
That was the only one where she got title credit, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but she was a full-fledged member of Wings.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Although she was kind of a secondary, he just kind of had her along because he didn't want to be away from her. Yoko actually did study music when she was in college. She worked with a lot of avant-garde musicians, John Cage, famous people.
Yeah.
Now, she was going the avant-garde route, which is definitely a cult artist who would not be in the mainstream. She would have probably continued to have a music career of some sort. Now, granted, that obviously gave her access to a lot of musicians and people in the rock and roll world that she would not have had access to if it weren't for John. But it's interesting to me the way this worked with he and Yoko recording albums never together, really. Well, no, that's not true. Sometime in New York, all the stuff that they did with Elephant's Memory in the early 70s, they were on stage together, working together, and most of the stuff that they did, starting with Two Virgins in 1969, if you can call that music, all the way up. Well, starting with Revolution Number 9 on the White Album, all the way up until
Music, Life with the Lions. There were three of them,
yes,
right? The Wedding Album.
The Wedding Album, the Unfinished Music, and the Two Virgins. So up until the Double Fantasy album, they were not billed as John and Yoko on an album together. It was more like she was either in the band too, or she had her solo work, because she had like three solo albums, I think, that came out between 72 and 74. So anyway, I mean, I just think it's kind of interesting because he and Paul did sort of follow similar paths in that way. And Yoko always is going to get the raw end of the deal because people wanted to look for a reason why the Beatles broke up, and she was an easy target. She was Japanese, so they were a mixed marriage that wasn't accepted at that time. But this is a tough one because really her music was kind of foisted onto the Beatle community, starting with Revolution Number 9 and then going all the way up through, all the stuff that they were doing that was very avant-garde and just mind-boggling to most people. And so it's kind of like you can't really expect people to have accepted that. It was the weirdest of the weird stuff that she's ever done, too, because in her career, she actually did have music that was more mainstream, more rock, based. Some of it is still kind of avant-garde and really ahead of its time, too. So it was hard for the public to accept it anyway. But having it foisted onto the Beatle world was just unacceptable.
Yeah.
So it's no wonder that people look at Yoko and her musical career and just don't even want to give her a second thought. Fast forward now, John's gone through all this time where he was just like a lost soul, basically. And then he and Yoko get back together in 75, and Yoko has Sean, their son. And at that time, John then pulls back from the music world, from his public life, really, and becomes like a house dad living at the Dakota apartments in New York City.
Which
and
is
Yoko
shocking
takes
to
over.
a lot of people. I mean, one of the most famous musicians in history, and he's just giving it all up to raise his
bake
kid.
bread.
Although they had tried for a long time to have, they'd had all sorts of struggles.
Several miscarriages. And
so it was obviously very important to them.
It was. And, at that point, I think that John kind of realized where his values were at that time and what he wanted to focus on. And Yoko took over the business end of all of his affairs. And she's a really smart lady.
Yeah. Highly educated. He grew up very wealthy, prestigious family.
So that lasted for about 4 years. And then they traveled to Bermuda, and they spent a couple months there. And in that time, John...
I didn't know about the sailing trip. Did you know about this story?
I did not. This is so interesting. He had gone, he'd sailed to Bermuda, and on that trip, they ran into a big storm. And basically the entire crew was like debilitated from sickness and couldn't actually perform the duties on the ship. And so the captain gave John the wheel, and he had to steer the ship. And he did it for like 6 hours or something through this storm while the actual captain was sleeping, trying to recover from being sick. And he came up and saw him out there singing sea shanties and and navigated his way through the storm, which is pretty amazing for a novice, So yeah, I didn't know about that.
It's a pretty incredible story for a guy who allegedly spent much of his days in bed watching TV.
Yeah. Anyway, when that happened, I guess it really just gave him a renewed confidence, and he started feeling inspired and wrote a bunch of songs. I think he wrote Starting Over, Watching the Wheels, and Woman while they were in Bermuda.
The 3 hits off of the record.
And actually, he got the name Double Fantasy from a plant. He would take Sean to the botanical gardens there a lot. And there's this one plant that was called Freesia Double Fantasy. And in fact, the Bahamas, there's like this whole tourist thing around. Spend the day like John Lennon did when he was here, where you can go on like a tour and do all the things that he did. So anyway, then when they came back to New York, they were very secretive initially about the fact that he had songs, wanted to record an album, because, as soon as the word got out, all the record labels were knocking on his door because everybody wanted John Lennon.
That's right. So he'd been on Apple Records. They were licensed through Capitol, EMI. But 5 years away, he's without a record deal at this point. So he starts recording this album. He does not have a deal. They're just going to record this thing and shop it around.
Yeah. And shockingly, he went with Geffen Records, which was a brand new label at the time.
David Geffen, who had started Asylum Records, championing a lot of the singer-songwriters of the 70s, Joni Mitchell, Jackson Browne, the Eagles.
Yeah. What he did, though, was really smart, because he approached Yoko, and he knew that she had songs that she wanted to contribute to this album, too. And he approached her and told her, that he was considering her music just as important as John's.
And he went to her first, right?
He went to her first.
Very savvy move on his.
And she was running all the business affairs at that point anyway, but she's a strong woman,
yes.
And she's making decisions in that relationship. And so he won Yoko over. So that's how he got the deal. They had reached out to Jack Douglas, who had produced his other solo albums, some of his other solo albums. Well, Phil Spector was the one on Imagine, but I think he produced a couple others, maybe Walls and Bridges and Mind Games.
Yep. Also produced Aerosmith's best records in the 70s and Cheap Trick.
Yep. And actually, when he heard the demos, he was like, I don't even see how we're going to be able to make this better, because the demo sounds so great. And I think a lot of it, too, just in John's vocals, it was so intimate. He just felt like the demos really brought across the intimacy of these songs.
Yeah, it's very personal material.
It is, yeah. I didn't know this either, that Rick Nielsen and Bunny Carlos came and recorded with him at one point.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that either.
Yeah, they recorded I'm Losing You, and one of Yoko songs, I'm Moving On, but those recordings didn't make it to the album. They had brought in other session musicians at that time, Tony Levin, Hugh McCracken, Earl Slick, who played with Bowie, and
McCracken, very prestigious session musician on the East Coast, on a lot of Van Morrison's best stuff.
Tony Levin played on Peter Gabriel's solo albums, would go on to King Crimson.
Andy Newmark, very well-known session drummer. Yeah, big-time session guys. The one name I wasn't familiar with is the keyboardist, Bob Small. I think that's the biggest session that he's been a part of.
Well, John wanted Nicky Hopkins, who played with the Stones, and Yoko was like, no way, wouldn't let him, because she knew that getting him and John in a room together, was bad news. And so she really kept John sheltered in that way and was like, nope, we're not going to have any of that. We're not going back to those days. Anyway, they end up going into the studio, recording these songs, and the album comes out. And actually, the album did not come out to favorable reviews. There were quite a few critics that had either reviewed it badly or were going to, but then he was killed, not long after. And so they rescinded a lot of these reviews. Maybe that had to do more with Yoko's material being on there too. I don't know.
It probably didn't help.
It probably didn't help. Yeah. And, it's interesting because at the time, they've been living in New York for a long time now. And for John, I mean, this was like a time now where they had gone through all the immigration issues where they were trying to deport him for years, basically like following him, harassing him, tapping his phone, things like that. That had finally been worked through. That was off his plate. He had spent this time with Sean and, kind of regrouping. And at this point, now he's going back into writing and recording like he did when he was 15. He's like, he didn't have the pressure. He didn't feel like he did coming right off the Beatles, where there's all this pressure behind all four of them, to put out material, well, especially he and Paul. So, he just kind of had this renewed sense of freedom and just being able to make music just for the sake of making music. He's living in New York City, so he's listening to current bands and things that are happening there. And this is at the time of like post-punk. And so bands like the B-52s, Lean Levitch, he's hearing these, especially vocals, and he's like, wait a minute, this sounds like Yoko. Especially the B-52s. Whoa, like you hear that, like Rock Lobster was big at that time. And actually, he also said too that he loved CBGBs because it reminded him of what it was like when they were performing in Hamburg. And how they were just up on stage, swearing, like drunk all night. Like it was very similar. He's like, this is exactly what we were doing. So anyway, he encouraged Yoko to be part of this album because he felt like maybe the public is ready to accept her style. And, there is definitely something to be said for the fact that I don't know if you could necessarily call it ahead of your time. She was doing something that wasn't openly accepted, maybe because it's so quirky and unusual. And maybe now because other people are doing it too. And it's just, there's more of an openness to what rock music can sound like, that it was okay and accepted by then. But also too, you have to think about all the time that's passed. It's been 10 years since the Beatles broke up. Maybe that whole backlash has kind of calmed down enough that they can put this album out together. I don't know if that really happened when it did come out, if it really was accepted. I know personally for me, the first time I bought this album was probably like in the mid 80s. And I was definitely on my cassette player fast forwarding the Yoko songs or having to pick up the needle on the record and move it to the next song every other song because they share songs. It's every other song is a John song and then a Yoko song. But I listened to it recently with new ears and I was like, wow, I actually really like the Yoko material on here.
Anyone in particular?
I like Kiss Kiss Kiss.
That was a B-side to Starting Over, right?
That was the B-side to Starting Over. I like Give Me Something. That's like a good kind of rockin' song. I like I'm Moving On. And then she does one that's sort of like a 40s sounding song, Yes, I'm Your Angel. It works with her vocals. And it's a good showcase that she can actually sing.
And Starting Over is a throwback sound. That's really kind of a 50s sounding feel to it.
It is. And like I said, that he dedicated that song to these 50s artists. It's definitely a throwback sound, which was popular at that time. In fact, John loved Happy Days. There's photos of him going onto the set of Happy Days. He was a big fan. So, that sound was popular. He has great musicians on this album. So the music is really good. And his vocals, I think, are outstanding.
Yeah, it's particularly on this track. I mean, the beginning part, our life together is so precious together.
And then once he gets into the harder part, there's all this reverb on his voice. It just sounds really cool. And with the lyric, just like starting over, it has meaning there between him and Yoko, referring back to them getting back together, having Sean starting this family, and then starting over in the music business again. It really actually makes it even so much more tragic, the timing and his murder so soon after this album was recorded, released, and he was in this renewed sense of, here I am, I'm back again, just like starting over, not for long.
Yep, not even a month and a half after the album came out, he was gone. And what do you remember, if anything, about hearing about his death?
I don't remember a lot. I do remember seeing news footage and coverage of vigils, outside the Dakota.
I mean, there really was no precedent for it. I mean, we've had artists lose their lives in violent circumstances. Sam Cooke, a good example.
Marvin Gaye,
but these were crimes of passion, or not crimes of passion necessarily, but
something more personal in their life.
This was an assassination. Yeah. I mean, this
is more along the lines of like JFK, Martin Luther King.
Right. When did that happen to an artist?
Yeah. If you listen to interviews from 1980, he talks about how he feels so free in New York because he can walk around on the streets. He can go to the club. He can go to the restaurant. People don't harass him. And that's one of the reasons why they loved being in New York and not in London. And, is that they could just move about freely and their daily lives and just not feel like they were being harassed. And he talks a lot about that at that time. It makes it even more sad to me.
I can remember exactly. I mean, it's vivid in my mind, hearing the news, hearing it on the radio and being shocked by it. So this is December 9th, 1980, right?
The day he was shot, December 8th.
8th. So I was 10. And like I said, big fan of McCartney and Wings, one of my favorite musical groups of the time, the 70s. So I would have known a lot of the Beatles music. I would have known a lot of McCartney and Wings hits. And then I would have been very familiar with Ringo Starr's two big hits, Photograph and You're 16. I would have been very unfamiliar with John Lennon's solo stuff. The last time he'd released new music, I wouldn't have been clued into it. I would have had no memory whatsoever of hearing Whatever Gets You Through the Night on the radio when that was a hit, or Mind Games. I might have known the song Mind Games at this point. But what I do remember, my dad worked in radio. He was a program director at the small town radio stations, AM, FM stations. And like a lot of people in the business, when a big story like this breaks, regular programming goes out the window. And I remember my dad working on a project to recognize his passing, working at home and like hearing him playing little bits of John Lennon's. So I remember hearing Power to the People and Instant Karma when he was working on this project to put on the radio. And I don't know if I'd even read a reference book that listed, what his hit songs were and the chart placements and on Billboard and whatnot. But I know I was familiar with the titles of some of his hit songs, even if I didn't know the songs. But I do remember hearing, while my dad was working on this project in the wake of his death to produce for radio, hearing him playing some of these songs. But, hearing the news, it was shocking as a young kid. And you're thinking to yourself, why would anybody shoot a Beatle? Why would somebody want to murder a Beatle? It just was just shocking to me. But I think we both like the song Just Like Starting Over a lot.
I do. I really like the song. And I think I like the song mostly because of John's vocals. And I love the lyric. I like the sentiment.
I appreciate it more now. I mean, at the time, particularly after he was killed, it was you're just constantly hearing it on the radio.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking at the time, it's okay. I like it. It's all right. I mean, I didn't think it was great.
Yeah.
I like the songs that came out after, the singles that came out after. And we'll talk more about this album and particularly one of those singles because I'm almost certain you're going to pick it for 81.
Yeah.
But, I just think it was kind of overplayed. It was number one for 5 weeks.
Yeah, I'm sure it probably was at the time. Yeah. It's different than anything else on the album. Nothing else sounds like that on the album. Of course, you also have to factor in the Yoko songs on the album too. John doesn't have that many songs on this album. I mean, really, he's got 7 songs. So it's a 7-song John Lennon album.
Well, he doesn't have that many songs, period. I mean, with that fallow 5-year period. I mean, there's a lot of records with his name on it, but really, when you get down to the core of his catalog, it's what? It's Plastic Ono Band, Imagine. I don't even think you kind of separate Sometime in New York City. That's just kind of like
See, Sometime in New York City is more like just a jam kind of thing. I don't really even think of that as really a full-fledged album of his.
It's really just 5 records, in his solo career.
Yeah, then Mind Games, Walls and Bridges, and then Rock and Roll, which is just all covers.
Yeah, that's kind of a separate deal too, yeah.
Yeah, so he really does not have a very dense catalog by any means, especially considering how much Paul has.
Right. I mean, he's putting out albums every year and multiple albums some of those years, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I think coming off of this long hiatus, I'm glad the album is as good as it is. And then that's what he's leaving as his legacy for that last recording. I think a lot of people probably resented the fact that they had to make their own version of the album that took out all the Yoko stuff when we could record cassettes off albums, or when CDs finally came out and we could just beep to fast forward through it. I mean, even like the album cover, they look happy. It's bittersweet to know the state that he was in right before his death, but I'm glad that we have a document in this album of that.
Well, one of the things that makes it sad is, his earlier on in his solo career, he was kind of a polarizing figure, very political, a left-wing symbol. He and Yoko, involved in a lot of activism, and some causes that may be slightly questionable. At this point now, he's kind of put that all in the past. He's in a new stage of life. He's 40 years old now. And this really hit home going on YouTube and looking at some of the contemporary stuff. The producer, Jack Douglas, I watched 2 things with him. One was a contemporary interview, and it was actually the next night he went on the Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder. I mean, he and John Lennon were very close. I mean, they've been working together since the early 70s. They were friendly.
He just produced Double Fantasy for him, so he'd spent time recently with him.
They lived nearby. They would share a limo back to their neighborhood. And so Douglas, he's obviously still very stunned, but he's on this show. He's a younger guy, 34 at the time. And, he felt like it was his duty to kind of carry out John's message and let people know where John was at here artistically and at this point in his life and what he's trying to see. He's saying he's very optimistic. He was looking forward to the decade of the 80s and putting the turbulence and turmoil of the late 60s and 70s behind, and just wanted everybody to have a positive outlook on life and work together to improve things and focus on your families and your communities. And that was the message that he wanted to bring to the people before he was tragically snuffed out.
That's the message that you get in this album from him. Some of the songs kind of date back to his Lost Weekend, but, you can see the difference between the songs that were talking about the past and the songs that are talking about the present and the future for him, like Beautiful Boy, Woman, Just Like Starting Over, like those songs particularly. That message is definitely in the album.
And as far as artists that were struck down, musical artists specifically that were struck down prematurely, I mean, he tops the list for most people. I think the next name that comes to mind for a lot of people would be Kurt Cobain.
But once again, you come along with the turbulent lifestyle and in the moment where he was living, Kurt Cobain, this is, I think the thing that just feels so tragic about John is that, like we were saying, this didn't come from what he was doing in his life.
Yeah.
He could have easily OD'd, gotten shot by Phil Spector during the rock and roll sessions. He could have, his life could have definitely ended, died on the boat in Bermuda. There's plenty of situations that he put himself in that could have taken his life. And he was just lucky enough to survive all of that and then come out on the other side. I'm glad that he actually was able to record the album and get that music out to the public before his death.
And we'll have, we'll probably have more of the music from that album when we get to 1981, because it did most of its sales in 1981 with its release late in the fall of 80 and his murder in December of that year. 2 other singles off the album coming out in 1980, both big hits.
REO Speedwagon is the same kind of thing where we're going to have songs that came out.
That's right. You're going to have another Lennon song. I'm going to have another REO song when we get to 1981.
Yes. And I was also thinking, too, your choice for this week, Magic. This is the second song we have on the playlist titled Magic.
Oh, that's right. I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, we have already chose Pilot's song Magic, and now we have Olivia Newton-John Magic.
So now we have multiple artist occurrences and multiple title occurrences on our Gen Excellent playlist. So that'll do it for us this week. Coming soon, we're going to take a look at the country crossover phenomenon and the urban cowboy movement that dates from 1980.
I guess I better watch it because I've actually never seen it.
I haven't either. I'm looking forward. It's supposed to be a pretty good movie. I've not seen it either. So we'll definitely take a look at the country crossovers from that year, and less an impact on the charts in the United States, more on the college radio level, but a big musical movement beginning late in 79, continuing in 1980, and that's the ska revival and the two-tone label that's responsible for a lot of that music in England. We'll take a look at that as well on a future show, and we've got songs from both of those genres that we'll be adding to our playlist. And Cheryl and I have a few more songs to choose before we're done with 1980. Of course, we'll have Cheryl's husband, Mike. They co-own Silver Platters record store chain. He'll chip in with his favorite song and album of 1980 before we leave.
He needs to start thinking about that because I don't think he has. So I got to get.
Do we have any contenders yet for Mike? I was handicapping that he's a big Pretenders fan, and that the first Pretenders album that came out in 80 would be a front runner for his choice. Am I reading that wrong?
But I don't know how that one doesn't necessarily stand out in my mind. I do think he really likes that album though. So we'll see. He might surprise me. Before
we go, a couple of 1980 albums that I'm listening to really for the first time that are really grabbing me. The Split Enz album, True Colors. You may be picking a song off of that before we're through.
Yep.
All of side one is great on that. And then the Feelies, a very influential album that came out in 1980. Not known by a lot of casual music fans, but definitely influential.
Crazy Rhythms.
The Crazy Rhythms. That's a real good one, too.
That's a great album. I love that album. All the way through.
Yeah. I listened to a little of that back to back with Van Halen's album, that You're One of the Children First. Two very guitar-oriented albums with very different guitar sounds.
Very, yes.
So we've got lots more 1980s music to talk, 1980 music to talk about before we get through the decade. But that'll wrap it up for us this week. I'm Matt.
I'm Cheryl.
And you've been listening to Matt and Cheryl's Gen Excellent Playlist. Thanks for tuning in. Take care, everybody.